Alright, so in the last video where I talked about the wall, I finished off doing the pine boards on the wall. These were 3.5 inch by 5/16 inch pine boards that I bought at Home Depot. And we decided to put a gloss coat of polyurethane on those. So you'll see here that this is a finished coat here. This is 3 coats of polyurethane that we put on that. We sanded it on the very first coat down to a 220 grit, and then we put on 1 coat, and that raised the grain a little bit. Did a very light sanding again with a 220, wiped it off with mineral spirits, and then we also wiped it off with a tack rag. The way I made the tack rag basically was just take a heavy cloth and took some of the polyurethane and dripped it all over the cloth. Made lots of dabs of polyurethane. That makes it real sticky. Ran it over the whole thing, wiped it off really good. That got all the dust off. Then we did on the second coat, and then before we put the third coat on, we did the same thing. It looks pretty rough when you put the first coat on, but it eventually works its way out. The way we did that was we used foam. I bought some 6-inch foam rollers, and we rolled the whole surface. And then I would come back with a foam brush. You'll see that when you use the roller, it actually gives sort of a orange peel finish to it. And I tested this 2 different ways in the end, and it actually works best if you roll it and then if you sort of tip it off with the brush. So I would roll the entire surface, then I would take the brush and just go all the way down each board with the grain of the wood, and that would take out the air bubbles and the imperfections that are left by the roller actually leaving splotchy marks on the surface of the actual finish itself, not the grain of the wood, but the actual sheen of it. So the next step after that, now that we've got that finished, is to come down here and look at the back wall. This is I talked about before, the Steve Frederick method of framing. Part of that is that you use a piece of your back hatch wall to be the end of your hatch. And as you can see here, I've marked this is a 2-inch line. That's not really definitive. That's sort of what he suggests in his book, a minimum of 2 inches. And that's what I did on my first build, and it worked well. So I did a 2-inch line here. The way I did that was I took and made a little jig here. And all I did was drill me a hole, stick my pencil in it, and then use my screw to set it. And you can see here that when the pencil's set in there to my jig is exactly 2 inches. Took that and traced that all the way around. Traced it all the way down to the bottom. One thing I fought with on the first build was looking at how my hatch would end up on my floor. And actually here, after talking to some other people on the forums and stuff, the end of the floor will be here, so that when this piece is finished, it will butt up to the floor. That seems to be the preferred method, so that you don't get water and dirt and other stuff up in the hardest for dirt and water to get up into the end of the hatch there. Up on the top here, you'll notice two critical pieces here. One is, this is going to be my end spar. My end hatch spar will sit in here. I actually offset that by 1/4 of an inch. Using this method and using the hurricane hinge that I'm using, that's the offset that they recommend, 1/4 of an inch. And you'll see later on in the build how that comes into play. The way I came up with this curve was a CD. Basically, I ran this line down. I made the CD match up to the 1/4 inch where it hits the edge of the hatch there, edge of the wall, and then down here, and I just traced that up. Gives you a nice even curve. You could do that squared off if you wanted to, but that is the method that seems to work for me, and on other builds I've seen, that's how it's done. Okay, so through the magic of me doing a little work yesterday, this is actually the other side of the wall that I've already cut off the piece on, and you'll see here on the side of the trailer how we left nice and smooth. Got a couple spots here where I cut through pocket holes. Not a big deal, not real happy about it, but it's not that big a deal. I did run the sander up and down this when I got done. You don't really want to remove much, if any, of that. material, you just want to sort of smooth it out. That'll make things go together a lot better when you get done. You'll notice here I've got my offset piece right there, my 1/4 inch sticking up. You'll see here, this is the piece that I cut off. So effectively, if I were standing inside of the galley right now, this would be my end wall. This is what's going to make the frame. My hinge is going to attach right here, and this will be the end of the hatch. You can see here that this is actually laminated piece outside. There's a 3/16 inch piece. That could be a 1/4 inch. That could be an 1/8 inch, whatever you use to skin your build. Here I've got my 3/4 inch 1x material, and then also another piece of the same 3/16 inch material, which again could be 1/8. This is not real critical on the outside. The 3/4 inch is, because we'll see when we get later on how that works out. But that's a piece that we're going to use later on. Alright, so the next part of this is going to be the piece that we use for our seal. And the seal will be, this piece here is actually a piece of 1/2 inch Baltic birch, or 1/2 inch birch, I'm sorry. Baltic birch is nice if you have it. This is some Columbia Pure Bond birch. It's got a pretty good end grain on it here. It's laminated pretty good. Worked out so pretty good so far. But this is actually going to be finished wood here, so I went ahead and finished this off with polyurethane. And I have cut this, and I will explain later on how this works. But basically, this piece needs to match the outside profile. So before I cut this hatch end piece off here, I put me a piece up here that will meet up to where my galley wall is here, and also to my floor, and I trimmed it, marked it with a pencil. I trimmed it to about a 1/16 of an inch with the jigsaw, and then I sanded it down so that it matched perfectly the outside of the profile of the trailer. Very important that you do that before you cut this piece off. So in the next video, I'll explain a little bit more about this and how that works, and how we're going to piece those pieces together to make the whole thing work. It looks complicated, but it's actually a very easy method once you look at it and do it one time. So that's it. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, and that's it for now. Thanks.